Mount St. Helens' eruption in 1980 was one of the most powerful and terrifying natural disasters in recent history. This video breaks down 10 shocking facts about that day, from the mountain literally sliding away to the sideways blast that reshaped everything in its path. Get ready to uncover the raw, unstoppable force of nature that changed the landscape forever. Mount St. Helens didn't just erupt, it collapsed first. That's what set off one of the most terrifying chain reactions in geological history. It all started on the morning of May 18, 1980, when a powerful magnitude 5.1 earthquake struck beneath the mountain. What happened next wasn't a typical rock slide or minor collapse. It was the entire north face of Mount St. Helens already bulging from weeks of magma pressure, giving way in one sudden catastrophic movement. Fact 1. The eruption triggered the largest landslide ever recorded in human history. Between 0.67 and 1 full cubic mile of rock, ice, and earth broke free and thundered downhill at speeds topping 100 miles per hour. Some estimates say even faster. That's roughly 12% of the mountain's entire mass just vanishing in seconds. Whole valleys were buried under hundreds of feet of debris. Hills became plains. The once iconic snow-capped cone of Mount St. Helens was instantly replaced with a gaping crater. The sheer scale of the collapse is still hard to process. Imagine an entire section of a city, roads, ground, buildings, turning into a raging, unstoppable wave of earth. That was the reality. The mountain didn't just erupt, it disintegrated, leaving behind a scar that told the world even the strongest-looking landscapes can fall apart in an instant. Most people picture volcanoes erupting straight up with plumes of ash and fire shooting skyward. But Mount St. Helens didn't follow the rules that day. After the massive landslide uncorked the mountain's pressure, the eruption didn't go vertical, it went sideways. Fact 2. The eruption produced a lateral blast so fast and violent, it leveled everything across hundreds of square miles. The collapse of the mountain's north face released a superheated mix of gas, ash, and pulverized rock that exploded outward at near supersonic speed, over 300 miles per hour, maybe even faster in the first few seconds. It was like uncapping a shaken soda bottle, but on a scale no one had ever seen. This wasn't just a strong wind, it was a wall of death. Entire forests were snapped flat like matchsticks. Trees hundreds of years old were stripped of bark, blown over in perfect rows, or completely vaporized in the hottest zones. The blast zone stretched across about 230 square miles, an area roughly the size of Chicago, and within that zone, life didn't just stop, it vanished. Anything alive, whether it was a tree, an animal, or a person, had almost no chance. The blast carved a clear, fan-shaped pattern into the landscape, a permanent mark showing exactly where the mountain aimed its fury. It wasn't just an eruption, it was a precision strike of destruction, fired directly from the heart of a collapsing volcano. By the time the ash settled and the smoke cleared, Mount St. Helens didn't just look different, it was missing a massive part of itself. The eruption didn't just damage the mountain, it completely reshaped it. Fact 3. The eruption blew off over 1,300 feet from the summit, leaving behind a massive crater. Before May 18th, Mount St. Helens stood proudly at 9,677 feet tall, with a smooth, symmetrical peak. But when the north face collapsed and the lateral blast followed, the top of the mountain was literally blown away. It happened in just minutes. What had taken thousands of years to form was destroyed in an instant. The result? A deep, gaping horseshoe-shaped crater, about 1.2 to 1.8 miles wide and more than 2,000 feet deep. Imagine carving out a hole in a mountain big enough to bury all of Manhattan under more than 40 feet of debris. That's the scale we're talking about. What used to be a towering peak turned into a hollowed-out shell, stripped bare by the force of nature. The mountain wasn't just changed, it was decapitated. This transformation, both violent and permanent, became one of the most haunting symbols of the eruption's raw power. To really understand the terror of Mount St. Helens, you have to look at the raw force behind it. This wasn't just a loud explosion or a big cloud of smoke. The energy released was beyond anything most of us can even picture. Fact 4. The eruption unleashed the explosive force of over 1,500 atomic bombs. More specifically, it's estimated that the eruption released thermal energy equal to about 24 to 26 megatons of TNT. To put that in perspective, the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima in World War II was around 15 kilotons. That means the Mount St. Helens eruption was at least 1,500 times more powerful than that bomb. That energy didn't just cause the mountain to explode, it fueled everything else. The landslide, the sideways blast, the pyroclastic flows, and the ash cloud that stretched into the sky. It superheated gases to temperatures of around 660 degrees Fahrenheit, instantly incinerating anything in the blast zone. Trees didn't just burn, they returned to ash. Animals and people caught in it didn't stand a chance. This wasn't a slow release of energy. It all happened in a terrifying burst that lasted only moments, but caused destruction for miles in every direction. When you hear the numbers, it almost doesn't sound real, but it was. And it's a chilling reminder that when Earth decides to release its power, it does so with no hesitation and no mercy. The blast zone around Mount St. Helens was a scene of total destruction, but the volcano's fury didn't stop at the mountain's edge. It climbed high into the sky and reached far across the country. Fact 5. The eruption sent an ash cloud over 16 miles high and darkened skies more than 250 miles away. In just 15 minutes, a towering column of ash and gas shot straight into the atmosphere, reaching over 80,000 feet. That's higher than commercial airplanes fly. This monstrous plume turned the sky black, even in places that seemed far from danger. In Spokane, Washington, more than 250 miles away, it looked like night had fallen by mid-morning. Streetlights flickered on, cars pulled off the roads, and people stood stunned in a dark, silent world, watching the gray ash fall like snow. But the ash didn't stop with Washington. Within 3 days, the finest particles had spread across the entire United States. Within 2 weeks, those particles had circled the globe. The air itself carried a signature of the disaster. An estimated 520 to 540 million tons of ash were ejected, settling over more than 22,000 square miles. And this wasn't soft powder, it was pulverized rock, gritty and sharp. It clogged engines, choked rivers, buried crops, and blanketed towns in a suffocating layer of gray. The eruption's reach didn't just destroy landscapes, it disrupted lives thousands of miles away. It was a terrifying reminder that when a volcano of that size erupts, its impact can literally cover the world. The Mount St. Helens eruption wasn't just a geological disaster, it was an ecological one too. In the blink of an eye, entire ecosystems were erased. Fact 6, the eruption obliterated over 4 billion board feet of timber and killed an estimated 7,000 large animals. The lateral blast and following pyroclastic flows didn't just scorch the land, they flattened it. Forests that had stood for hundreds of years were knocked over like dominoes, stripped bare of branches and bark. The trees that weren't blown away were burned, buried, or vaporized completely. From the air, it looked like someone had taken a giant hand and swept it across the landscape, leaving nothing standing. The destruction didn't stop with the trees. Wildlife was hit just as hard. Thousands of deer, elk, and bears were caught in the blast zone, along with uncountable birds and small mammals. Even aquatic life suffered. Rivers and lakes filled with hot ash and debris, killing off millions of fish, including countless young salmon in hatcheries. The once green Pacific Northwest became a lifeless, gray wasteland almost instantly. Rescue pilots described it as a moonscape, silent, scorched, and sterile. Nothing moved, no birds sang. The vibrant wilderness that once surrounded Mount St. Helens was gone in a flash, replaced by a haunting stillness. It was one of the most complete and rapid destructions of a natural habitat ever witnessed in modern times. What followed the blast wasn't just ash and fire. It was a flood of mud, rock, and destruction that roared down the mountainside like a living force. Fact 7. The eruption unleashed lahars, volcanic mudflows that destroyed bridges, roads, and everything in their path. The intense heat from the eruption instantly melted the glaciers and thick snowpack sitting atop Mount St. Helens. All that water, an estimated 46 billion gallons, mixed with volcanic debris to form lahars. These weren't ordinary mudslides. They were thick, cement-like rivers of ash, pumice, and rock, surging down river valleys with terrifying power. High up on the slopes, some of these lahars tore down the mountain at speeds close to 90 miles per hour. Even when they slowed to just a few miles per hour in flatter terrain, they were still strong enough to crush everything in their way. They snapped trees, buried homes, and tossed around vehicles and logging equipment like toys. The Tuttle River Valley was hit especially hard. Entire bridges, 27 of them, were destroyed or left in ruins. Logging camps and towns miles downstream were suddenly swallowed by this fast-moving sludge. For many people in these areas, there was no warning. The lahars came silently but forcefully, turning familiar rivers into deadly brown torrents. Even after the eruption ended, so the lahars kept reshaping the landscape. They clogged riverbeds with thick sediment, which led to years of recurring floods. In some places, the courses of rivers were permanently changed. The lahars of Mount St. Helens weren't just a secondary threat. They were a devastating disaster of their own, spreading destruction far from the mountain itself. Mount St. Helens' eruption didn't just tear through the landscape, it struck a massive blow to the local economy and infrastructure, leaving a financial disaster in its wake. Fact 8. The eruption caused over $1 billion in damages in 1980, which would be more than $3.4 billion today. The immediate aftermath saw 200 homes either buried under ash or swept away by mud flows. Vital infrastructure took a huge hit. 47 bridges were destroyed or badly damaged, 15 miles of railway tracks were wiped out, and 185 miles of highways and roads were either buried or washed away. The timber industry, a cornerstone of the local economy, suffered staggering losses. Over 4 billion board feet of timber were lost, enough wood to build about 300,000 two-bedroom homes. Farmland was coated in layers of ash, ruining crops and livelihoods. Tourism, once thriving due to the mountain's natural beauty, came to a standstill overnight. The cleanup was a massive effort. Approximately 900,000 tons of ash had to be removed just from Washington state highways and airports alone. This staggering price tag was more than just numbers. It was a harsh reminder of how deeply a single natural disaster can ripple through communities, economies, and daily life, leaving years of recovery ahead. Behind all the destruction and numbers lies the most heartbreaking truth: the human toll of Mount St. Helens' eruption. Fact 9. 57 people lost their lives during the May 18, 1980 eruption. These were not just statistics, they were real individuals. Scientists, photographers, loggers, residents, and tourists caught in the path of unimaginable destruction. Many, like volcanologist David Johnston, were stationed at observation posts, risking everything to study the volcano. His last chilling words over the radio, "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it," capture the sudden horror of that moment. Some victims were residents who chose not to evacuate or visitors unaware of the eruption's scale. The official danger zones didn't anticipate the massive sideways blast that devastated areas thought to be safe. People miles away from the summit were caught by the searing heat and force of the lateral blast. Others were overtaken by fast-moving lahars or died from inhaling thick ash. Search and rescue teams faced grim scenes. Entire areas showed no sign of life, and some bodies were never recovered, buried beneath the altered landscape. This tragic loss of life stands as the most profound and terrifying reminder of the eruption's deadly power. The eruption's terror didn't end when the ash finally settled. In fact, the aftermath created a long-lasting nightmare that affected people and machinery across the Pacific Northwest and even beyond. Fact 10. The fine volcanic ash from Mount St. Helens caused widespread mechanical failures and serious environmental problems that lasted for months and years. This wasn't ordinary dust. It was made of tiny, sharp particles of rock and glass that were extremely harmful to breathe. Communities faced major health risks as the ash filled the air, but the damage went further than just health. Car engines seized up as their air filters clogged, and those tiny abrasive particles scratched engine cylinders. Electrical equipment short-circuited, while sewage and water treatment systems struggled to function under the weight of the ash. Air travel was disrupted for weeks because volcanic ash is a major hazard for jet engines. Cleanup was a massive and exhausting effort. Even after the initial layers of ash were cleared, winds would lift the fine dust again, causing ongoing problems and a constant gritty reminder of the eruption. Roads were slippery and dangerous, visibility was often poor, and the landscape remained a strange, eerie gray for a long time. This lingering mechanical and environmental fallout shows just how far the eruption's impact reached, disrupting daily life and infrastructure in deeply unsettling and lasting ways. Mount St. Helens' eruption wasn't just a moment of destruction. It reshaped how we understand volcanoes and the risks they pose. The eruption was a brutal reminder that nature's power can strike suddenly and with devastating force, catching many off guard despite warnings. The massive crater, the flattened forests, the rivers forever changed by lahars, and the blanket of ash across states stand as permanent markers of that terrifying day in May of 1980. Scientists learned invaluable lessons about volcanic activity, especially how magma movement can create bulges that signal impending eruptions, and how eruptions can blast sideways, not just straight up. These insights have since improved monitoring and safety measures around volcanoes worldwide. The human loss and ecological devastation were heartbreaking, but the recovery and regrowth in the decades since show nature's resilience. The landscape is slowly healing, with new forests growing and wildlife returning, yet the scars remain a sober reminder of Earth's incredible forces. In the end, Mount St. Helens taught us humility and vigilance. It reminded us that even the most familiar landscapes can transform in an instant, and that understanding these terrifying forces is key to protecting ourselves in the future. If the power of Mount St. Helens' eruption unsettled you, you're not alone. Its story is one of raw destruction, loss, and eventual renewal, a powerful chapter in the ever-unfolding story of our planet. Thanks for joining this journey into one of nature's most awe-inspiring and terrifying events. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts on which fact shocked you the most. Stay curious and stay safe out there. The 2011 Joplin tornado is one of the deadliest and most destructive tornadoes in recent United States history. It struck the city of Joplin, Missouri on the afternoon of May 22, 2011. Meteorologists had issued warnings earlier that day, but nothing could fully prepare the community for the storm's incredible power. This tornado was classified as an EF5, which is the highest rating on the enhanced Fujita scale, reserved for the most violent and devastating tornadoes. With winds exceeding 200 miles per hour, it tore through neighborhoods with terrifying speed and force. In the coming parts, I'll share 10 terrifying and shocking facts about this tornado that reveal just how intense and tragic this natural disaster really was. Fact 1 will dive into the scale of destruction this storm caused, so stay tuned as we uncover the full impact of the Joplin tornado. Fact 1. The Joplin tornado produced wind speeds exceeding 220 miles per hour, categorizing it firmly as an EF5, the highest rating on the enhanced Fujita scale. These winds were so powerful, they could tear entire houses from their foundations, flatten cars, and snap mature trees like they were thin sticks. The force generated by such winds is equivalent to an enormous hurricane, but focused in a rapidly spinning funnel that can destroy everything in its path within seconds. This kind of wind speed is rare and marks the tornado as one of the most violent storms ever recorded in the United States. The intense pressure differences and sheer velocity caused buildings to collapse and tossed debris like deadly missiles through neighborhoods. Fact 2. Over 7,000 buildings in Joplin were damaged or completely destroyed by the tornado's fury. This included homes, schools, businesses, and critical infrastructure, such as hospitals and fire stations. Entire neighborhoods were leveled, leaving thousands of residents displaced and communities fractured. The destruction was so widespread that emergency responders faced immense challenges navigating through rubble and fallen power lines to reach survivors. The loss of homes and workplaces also meant a devastating economic impact on the city, compounding the human tragedy with financial hardship. Fact 3. The tornado carved a path of destruction stretching over 22 miles long and up to nearly 1 mile wide in places. This vast damage corridor was a continuous swath of flattened trees, demolished buildings, and uprooted streets, showing the tornado's relentless and sweeping power as it moved through Joplin and nearby areas. Such a long, continuous track is unusual and highlights the storm's intensity and duration on the ground. Witnesses described a roaring sound like a freight train as the tornado approached, and the scale of the damage area confirmed the storm's devastating reach. This path of ruin permanently altered the geography and lives of everyone in its way. Fact 4. The 2011 Joplin tornado resulted in 163 confirmed deaths, making it the deadliest single tornado event in the United States since modern record-keeping began. This tragic loss of life shocked the nation and highlighted just how dangerous and unpredictable such storms can be. Many victims were caught off guard despite warnings, as the tornado struck in the late afternoon when many people were still active outside or commuting. The scale of fatalities surpassed nearly every other tornado in recent history, reflecting both the tornado's intensity and the densely populated areas it struck. Fact 5. Thousands of people were injured during the tornado, with many suffering severe trauma. Local hospitals and emergency services were overwhelmed by the sudden influx of patients, forcing medical staff to work around the clock under extremely difficult conditions. Many injuries were caused by flying debris, collapsing buildings, and car accidents as people tried to escape. The massive number of casualties strained resources and highlighted the urgent need for disaster preparedness and response planning in tornado-prone regions. Fact 6. The emergency response to the Joplin tornado was remarkable, with tens of thousands of volunteers, aid workers, and first responders converging on the city from across the country. Firefighters, police officers, medical teams, and the National Guard worked tirelessly to rescue trapped survivors, provide medical care, and clear debris. Non-governmental organizations and community groups quickly mobilized to offer food, shelter, and emotional support to displaced residents. This massive coordinated effort played a crucial role in saving lives and beginning the long road to recovery for the devastated community. Fact 7. During the Joplin tornado, a group of people survived by taking shelter in the basement of a grocery store that was not officially designated as a storm shelter. This basement was located beneath the building's concrete floor and, despite not being designed for tornado protection, it withstood the intense winds and flying debris. The thick concrete and sturdy walls provided enough safety to protect them while the tornado devastated everything above ground. This survival spot saved numerous lives in an area where proper shelters were scarce. Fact 8. One of the most incredible survival stories involved a family whose car was violently lifted by the tornado and thrown over 200 feet across an open field. The vehicle was completely mangled, yet all 4 family members inside survived with only minor cuts and bruises. Experts later explained that the family had been thrown into the back seat just before the car was airborne, which may have helped protect them from more serious injuries. This rare instance demonstrates how unpredictable tornadoes are and how survival can sometimes depend on small moments of luck amid extreme danger. Fact 9. The economic damage caused by the Joplin tornado was staggering, with estimates exceeding $2 billion. This made it one of the most costly tornadoes in United States history. Entire neighborhoods were flattened, businesses destroyed, and public infrastructure suffered severe damage. The financial impact extended beyond immediate repairs, as many residents faced long-term challenges such as lost jobs, insurance battles, and the cost of relocating. The city's tax base took years to recover, showing how a single natural disaster can leave lasting economic scars on a community. Fact 10. Rebuilding Joplin was a massive undertaking that lasted several years and involved changes to how the city prepares for future storms. New building codes were introduced requiring stronger materials and safer construction techniques designed to withstand extreme wind speeds. Emergency response systems were also improved, including more efficient warning alerts and public shelters to better protect residents. The community's resilience was evident in how quickly they organized cleanup efforts and supported one another. These changes aimed to reduce the risk of such devastation happening again, making Joplin a model for tornado recovery and preparedness nationwide. The 2011 Joplin tornado stands as a stark reminder of nature's immense power and the devastating impact it can have on a community. From the unimaginable strength of the winds to the heartbreaking loss of lives, the facts we've covered reveal just how terrifying and shocking this event truly was. It wasn't just the destruction of buildings or the economic damage. It was the human stories of survival, loss, and resilience that define the aftermath. The city's recovery showed incredible strength, but it also highlighted the importance of being prepared for such disasters. Remembering these facts helps us respect the forces of nature and encourages us all to take safety seriously. Let us know in the comments which fact surprised or affected you the most, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into natural disasters and the stories behind them. Welcome to this video where we explore 10 devastating facts about the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, one of the deadliest natural disasters in recent history. On December 26, 2004, a massive earthquake triggered a tsunami that changed countless lives forever. Fact 1. This tsunami was one of the deadliest disasters in modern history. It claimed an estimated 227,000 to 230,000 lives, with some estimates even higher, when including those missing and never found. Entire communities were wiped out in seconds, leaving a deep scar on the world that is still remembered today. Fact 2. The earthquake that released the energy of 23,000 atomic bombs. On December 26, 2004, a massive undersea earthquake struck off the west coast of Sumatra, Indonesia. This earthquake measured between 9.1 and 9.3 in magnitude, making it the third most powerful ever recorded since 1900 and the strongest ever in Asia. Scientists estimate that the energy released by this earthquake was equal to 23,000 atomic bombs like the one dropped on Hiroshima, exploding all at once. The earthquake ruptured a fault line about 1,300 to 1,600 kilometers long, roughly the distance from London to Rome. Along this rupture, the seabed was violently lifted in some places by as much as 15 meters, or 50 feet. This massive movement was so intense that it caused the entire planet to shake by up to 1 centimeter, and even triggered smaller earthquakes as far away as Alaska. Fact 3. Tsunami waves traveled as fast as jet airliners. The earthquake's immense power pushed a vast amount of water, creating tsunami waves that raced across the Indian Ocean at incredible speeds. These waves traveled up to 800 kilometers per hour, which is about 500 miles per hour, as fast as a jet airliner. While moving over the deep ocean, the waves were not very tall and often went unnoticed by ships. But as they approached shallow coastal areas, their speed slowed down and their height grew dramatically. In some of the worst hit places, like Aceh province in Indonesia, the waves reached heights of up to 30 meters, nearly 100 feet tall, taller than a 10-story building. These massive walls of water surged several kilometers inland, destroying everything in their path and leaving behind scenes of total devastation. Fact 4. Aceh, Indonesia, suffered the highest death toll of any single region, with over 170,000 people killed or missing. This fact highlights just how devastating the tsunami's impact was on communities closest to the earthquake's epicenter. The waves struck within minutes, giving almost no warning and leaving residents no time to escape. Entire villages were destroyed and families were separated or lost in the chaos. The scale of loss was so immense that in many places, bodies were never recovered and survivors faced overwhelming grief. The destruction also included critical infrastructure, like hospitals and schools, compounding the tragedy. This staggering human cost in Aceh alone represents a tragic chapter in the disaster's overall impact, illustrating the extreme vulnerability of coastal populations to sudden natural catastrophes. Fact 5. The 2004 tsunami displaced an estimated 1.7 to 2 million people across affected countries, creating one of the largest humanitarian crises in recent history. Entire communities were rendered uninhabitable as homes, schools, and businesses were destroyed by the waves and flooding. Survivors were forced into temporary shelters, refugee camps, or had to relocate far from their original homes. Among those most affected were thousands of children who lost their parents or became separated from their families amid the chaos. This mass displacement created long-term challenges, including the need for food, clean water, medical care, and psychological support. Many displaced families struggled to rebuild their lives, often facing poverty and uncertainty for years after the disaster. The scale of displacement underscored how the tsunami didn't just take lives, it tore apart the social and economic fabric of entire regions. Fact 6. Women and children were disproportionately affected, with women dying at rates up to 4 times higher than men in some areas. This heartbreaking fact reveals how social roles and circumstances increased vulnerability during the tsunami. Many women were at home, caring for children or working near the shore when the waves struck, limiting their chances to escape quickly. Children's smaller size and physical strength made them especially vulnerable to the powerful currents and debris. This tragic imbalance highlighted how disasters often impact certain groups more severely due to factors like location, responsibilities, and physical ability. The lessons learned from this have since influenced disaster response plans worldwide, aiming to better protect those most at risk during emergencies. Fact 7. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami caused massive economic and environmental damage, estimated at nearly $10 billion in losses. Over 141,000 homes were destroyed, along with critical infrastructure such as roads, bridges, schools, and hospitals. Coastal communities that relied heavily on fishing and farming faced devastating blows, with fishing fleets wiped out and farmland flooded by salt water, making it unusable for years. In Aceh province alone, over 600,000 people lost their jobs because their livelihoods were destroyed. Environmentally, vital ecosystems like mangrove forests and coral reefs, which serve as natural coastal barriers, were severely damaged or destroyed. Saltwater contamination of freshwater supplies and farmland created long-term challenges for recovery and food security. The enormous amount of debris left behind also posed ongoing environmental hazards and made cleanup efforts incredibly difficult. Fact 8. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami had a global reach, affecting countries thousands of kilometers from the epicenter. Waves caused by the tsunami traveled across the entire Indian Ocean, reaching as far as the eastern coast of Africa. Tragically, people died in places like South Africa, nearly 8,000 kilometers away from where the earthquake struck. The disaster happened during the peak holiday season. So many international tourists were visiting popular coastal resorts in Thailand, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives. Thousands of these tourists lost their lives, including over 500 Germans and a similar number of Swedish visitors. For several nations, this became one of the deadliest disasters involving their citizens abroad in recent history. This widespread impact highlighted just how far-reaching the tsunami's deadly power truly was, turning it into a global tragedy felt around the world. Fact 9. One of the most tragic aspects of the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami was the lack of an effective warning system. Unlike the Pacific Ocean, which had a well-established tsunami warning network, the Indian Ocean had almost no early warning infrastructure at the time. This meant that coastal communities received little to no advance notice before the waves struck. In some places farther from the epicenter, like Sri Lanka and India, people had several hours between the earthquake and the tsunami's arrival, but still weren't warned. Closer to the epicenter, such as in Sumatra, the time between the earthquake and the first waves was often just 10 to 20 minutes, leaving almost no time to react. This critical failure in disaster preparedness contributed greatly to the high death toll and devastation. It showed the urgent need for better warning systems to protect vulnerable coastal populations from future tsunamis. Fact 10. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami triggered an unprecedented global humanitarian response that changed how the world handles such disasters. In the aftermath, over $14 billion were pledged by governments, charities, and individuals worldwide to support relief efforts and rebuilding. Emergency teams from across the globe rushed to affected areas, despite massive challenges like destroyed roads, bridges, and isolated communities. This tragedy also led to the creation of the Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning and Mitigation System, designed to detect future tsunamis and issue timely alerts. Beyond technology, it sparked a global focus on disaster preparedness, public education about tsunami warning signs, and building stronger infrastructure in vulnerable coastal zones. The disaster highlighted how international cooperation and preparedness can save lives in future catastrophes. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami remains one of the most devastating natural disasters in modern history. Its impact stretched far beyond the immediate destruction, touching millions of lives with loss, trauma, and lasting challenges. While the scale of the tragedy was overwhelming, it also sparked a global response that brought new awareness, improved warning systems, and stronger disaster preparedness around the world. The stories of survival, resilience, and recovery continue to inspire, reminding us of both nature's power and human strength. As we remember this event, it's important to carry forward the lessons learned and remain vigilant in protecting vulnerable communities from future catastrophes. The legacy of the tsunami is a call to action, one wise so, to prepare, to support, and to never forget.